A story from the Great White North, a mother's reckoning. I told my son his dad just passed. He said it is Sophie's birthday. Can we chat tomorrow? That was the moment I realized I did not just lose a husband. I lost a son too. He never showed up to the funeral, but 3 weeks later, he got a letter from my lawyer. He opened it and froze. I did something he will never forget. And I never said a word. Before we dive in, do me a favor and hit that like button and subscribe. And please tell me and everyone else, what is one life lesson everyone should hear before it is too late? Share it in the comments below. Thanks, EH. Gerald died right there at the kitchen table, halfway through a joke about how I would bought the wrong kind of cream again. If I drop dead from this powdered nonsense, he said, chuckling, tapping his spoon against the side of his mug, you will finally know real guilt. Then his hand twitched. The spoon slipped. His eyes widened like he had forgotten how to breathe. I dropped the butter knife I was using and ran to him, screaming his name. But he was already gone. His body went limp before I could even call 911, before my knees hit the tile, before I could ask him if it was another one of his goddamn jokes. It was not. The operator's voice in my ear was calm while my world split open. I kept whispering his name while they guided me through chest compressions, but I already knew. I knew from the way his head slumped against his shoulder, from how cold his fingers felt when I tried to hold them. When the paramedics arrived, I stepped aside, numb, hearing words like massive, unrecoverable, DNR. I just nodded. The house felt suddenly too loud and too quiet at the same time. I sat on the edge of the couch, staring at the floor. After they would covered him, after they would told me there was nothing more they could do, I picked up my phone. I called Liam, my only son. It rang 5 times. When he finally answered, I was shaking. But I managed to say, Liam, it is Dad. He just collapsed. He is dead. There was a pause, and then his voice, flat, distracted, said, Oh, Mom, today's Sophie's birthday. Can I call you later? I did not even understand the words at first. I thought I would hallucinated them, but then he added, She has got this whole brunch planned, and we have got people over. I said nothing, not a scream, not a sob, just silence. My hand lowered the phone on instinct. I hung up on my own son before I could hear anything else that would break me even further. The room around me started to hum, like my ears were filling with pressure. I looked over at Gerald's chair, the one he always sat in for breakfast, for late-night crossword puzzles, the one he was still slumped in, and I just sat beside him for what felt like an hour, holding his hand like it would bring him back. At some point, the coroner came. They asked if I wanted a moment. I did not. What was the point? The moment I needed was gone. I went upstairs, locked the door, and lay down on our bed without changing the sheets. Gerald's phone was on the nightstand. I picked it up, hoping there'd be something, and there was a missed call log from last night, 10:42 p.m. 1 missed call to Liam. No voicemail, no answer. He tried. Gerald tried to talk to him last night. Maybe he knew something was wrong. Maybe he felt it. And our son ignored it. I held the phone to my chest and felt the weight of everything we would build. 42 years of marriage, a house full of memories, a man who worked every damn day to make sure his family never went without. And the silence from Liam rang louder than any eulogy ever could. The day of Gerald's funeral felt like stepping into a parallel universe where I could see everyone's lips moving, but hear nothing, except the screaming silence of Liam's absence. I stood by the casket, gripping the edges of the podium, trying to keep my balance, while people I had not seen in years came up and whispered things like, He was such a good man, and we are so sorry. And all I could think about was how my son, my only child, was not there. Not in the pews, not standing beside me, not even in the damn parking lot. When I called the night before to confirm the funeral time, Sophie answered and told me Liam was still thinking about it because they had already booked a weekend getaway and cancellation fees are steep this close to the date. I remember staring at the phone, blinking, as she rambled about how Sophie's birthday was important too, and that she was trying to keep things light for the sake of her own mental health. I did not even respond. I just hung up. I did not want to beg for attendance at a funeral, especially not for Gerald's. Not when he was the one who stayed up all night with a colicky Liam, who spent weekends building Lego cities and teaching him how to balance a checkbook by age 12. And not when Gerald called Liam the night before he died and never got a call back. People noticed. Of course they did. The whispers started before the service even began. Where's Liam? Did he miss his flight? Is Sophie okay? Like they were the ones we should be worried about. Even Gerald's college friend Doug leaned over and said, I thought your boy would be front and center today, and I just nodded like it was not breaking me in half. But the moment that really shattered me came after the service when one of Gerald's co-workers, Steve, approached me by the coffee urn in the fellowship hall and said, I do not mean to pry, but Gerald mentioned something odd in passing last month about helping Liam out financially. Seemed stressed about it. That stopped me cold, because Gerald never told me anything like that. We had no secrets. Or so I thought. I did not ask Steve to elaborate. I just smiled, thanked him for coming, and excused myself to the restroom where I sat on the toilet seat lid and stared at the floor until someone knocked, asking if everything was okay. Everything was not okay. My son missed his father's funeral for a brunch and a weekend getaway. And now I was hearing hints of financial stress and secrecy. When I got home that night, the silence in the house was unbearable. I poured myself a glass of wine, stared at Gerald's armchair, and tried not to think about how cold and alone I felt. Then I opened my phone and saw a photo Sophie had posted on Instagram. Her in a bright pink dress, holding a mimosa, captioned, Best birthday ever, love my hubby. It had been posted during the funeral. During the eulogy, I stared at the screen until the image blurred and my hands started to shake. That night, I could not sleep. I lay in our bed, reaching instinctively for the weight of Gerald's hand beside me, and came up empty. At around 3:00 a.m., I got up, opened Gerald's desk drawer, and started pulling out paperwork, bank statements, insurance records, old receipts, anything that might explain what Steve had said. Because now it was not just grief. Now there was something else, something colder, a sense that maybe I did not know the full story of my own family, and the one person who could have answered everything, Gerald, was gone. The next morning I woke up with a mission, not out of curiosity, but out of something sharper, something closer to rage disguised as grief. And I went straight to Gerald's filing cabinet, the one he kept locked, but always said I had the spare key for, which I did, taped to the back of our wedding photo in the closet, like some quaint little gesture of trust that now felt more like a test. I opened the drawer and started going through folders, thick with years of tax returns, retirement plans, bank statements organized by month and year, like a man who never expected to die mid-sentence. It did not take long to find it, a slim blue folder labeled Liam Transfers. I sat down, heart pounding, and flipped through a timeline of quiet betrayal. Regular wire transfers from Gerald's account. To Liam's, $2,000 here, $3,500 there, and one that made my hands go cold. $12,000, labeled Urgent Sophie Medical. I stared at the numbers like they might change if I blinked hard enough. There were 15 transfers in the past 18 months. I had no idea. Gerald never told me. We did not keep secrets. We would agreed on that the day we merged bank accounts and picked out a crib together. I kept reading, searching for a clue, something to make it make sense. That is when I found it, a letter folded and tucked between the last two statements. It was handwritten on yellow legal pad paper, the kind Gerald always kept on his desk. And it was not addressed to me, it was addressed to Liam. Liam, it read, this is the second time you have told your mother one thing and done another. I have kept quiet because I wanted to believe you were being honest, but if you lie about Sophie's expenses again, or if I find out you have used this money for anything other than what you said, I will have no choice but to cut you off completely. I love you, but I won't let you take advantage of your mother's trust. It was not signed, but I knew Gerald's handwriting like I knew the creases of his palm. He never sent it. It was dated 2 weeks before he died. I sat there staring at it, my hand trembling, the edges of the paper crinkling in my grip. My mind kept returning to the way Liam's voice sounded over the phone after I told him his father died. Calm, inconvenience, like I was asking him to cancel a dentist appointment. I could not breathe. I could not cry. I just sat there trapped in this horrible realization that the man I loved had spent the last months of his life quietly battling our son's lies while shielding me from the fallout. And now Liam, who could not be bothered to show up to the funeral, had accepted tens of thousands of dollars while pretending nothing was wrong. I put the folder back in the drawer, locked it, and tucked the key back behind the photo where it belonged. Not out of respect, but because I needed time to think. Not just about the money or the lies, but about what it all meant, about what kind of man my son had become, and whether I had the strength to do what Gerald clearly had not been able to finish. I sat down at the kitchen table, the same place Gerald had died 5 days ago, and stared at the same coffee mug he would held, still unwashed in the sink. I did not know what I was going to do yet, but I knew one thing: I was done pretending everything was fine. He showed up unannounced on a Wednesday, 5 days after the funeral, as if that somehow made it okay, as if grief had an expiration date and his delayed appearance could still count for something. But when I opened the door and saw Liam standing there with his hands in his jacket pockets and that hollow, uncomfortable look in his eyes, I did not feel relief. I felt calculation, like he would come not out of sorrow but obligation, or, worse, damage control. Behind him was Sophie, sitting in their car, idling in the driveway like she was ready to drive off the second it got uncomfortable, which told me everything before he even opened his mouth. "Mom," he said, and I stepped aside without a word, leading him into the living room where Gerald's chair still sat, untouched, a silent monument to everything Liam had ignored. I offered him coffee out of habit, but he declined, fidgeting on the edge of the couch like he was waiting for a commercial break so he could escape, and when he finally spoke, it was with a strange sort of politeness. "Sophie thinks I should have come sooner, and she is probably right." And I wanted to laugh, because of course she was the one who told him. Of course it took her permission, not love or guilt or a conscience, just her saying go fix it like it was a PR issue. I nodded slowly and sat across from him, my phone already recording from the pocket of my cardigan, because I did not trust myself to remember every lie, every deflection, and I did not trust him not to gaslight me about this moment later, especially not after what I would found in Gerald's files. "Did you know your father tried to call you the night before he died?" I asked, watching his face for the flinch, and it came. A slight twitch in his jaw, followed by a defensive shrug. "I had my phone on silent. We were out for dinner. Sophie planned this surprise thing." He caught himself mid-sentence, like he realized how ridiculous it sounded, and I just let the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable enough that he started filling it with more half-formed excuses. I meant to call him back. I did, but I did not know it was serious. He never said anything about being sick. You did not either. And I kept my expression neutral because I did not want him to see how much that line hurt. How quickly he tried to shift the blame onto me, like it was my fault he did not show up, like Gerald's death was a scheduling error we all shared responsibility for. He was not sick, Liam. He had a heart attack at the breakfast table. 5 minutes after joking about the coffee creamer, I said flatly, and he looked away, rubbing his forehead like this conversation was a burden, like I was making things worse by refusing to smooth it over. Then I leaned forward and said it plainly. I found the transfers. And his whole body stiffened like I would dropped a match onto gasoline. "What transfers?" he said, too quickly, too loudly, and I did not bother to ease him into it. "The ones from Dad's account to yours. Sophie's medical bills, your vacation, the rent shortfall. Don't lie to me, Liam. Not now." And he had the audacity to look offended. "Those were loans, Mom. We were going through a rough patch," Dad offered. And that is when I handed him the folded yellow letter, the one Gerald wrote, but never sent. The one where he told Liam that if he lied again, the money would stop. He read it in silence, then folded it back up like it was not the most damning piece of evidence of who he would become, and said he did not mean that. And I realized I was not talking to my son anymore, not the boy who used to fall asleep on Gerald's chest during Sunday football, not the teenager who helped build his father's shed in the backyard, but a man who had learned how to rationalize his own betrayal. And I felt nothing but cold, sharp clarity. This was not someone who made a mistake. This was someone who had made a choice, over and over, to prioritize his own comfort over our family. And now he was here because Sophie had told him to salvage what was left. I stood up, walked to the door, and said, "I will let you know if I need anything from you." And he looked like he wanted to say something, but Sophie honked from the driveway, and he just nodded, walking out without a hug, without a single question about how I was holding up. And I watched him get in the car, watched Sophie glance at the house with that smirk she probably did not even realize she wore when she thought she would won something. And I thought, you have no idea what is coming. The morning after Liam's visit, I woke up with a calmness that almost scared me. The kind that comes not from peace, but from decision. I did not even make coffee before calling Owen McLeod, our longtime attorney, the man who handled Gerald's business filings for decades and sent us birthday cards without fail. When I told him I needed to revise my will immediately, he did not ask questions, just scheduled me for the next day. And I gathered everything: bank statements, the folder of Liam's transfers, Gerald's unsent letter, and the audio file of Liam's pathetic half-confession from the day before. Then I added one final item, a handwritten letter to Chloe, our granddaughter, to be opened on her 18th birthday. Because whatever else happened in this family, that little girl deserved to know the truth. Not the version her mother would spin, or the silence Liam would try to pass off as dignity. When I walked into Owen's office, he took one look at my face and said, "I assume this is about more than estate planning." And I nodded, handed him the documents, and said, "Everything goes into a trust. Every account, every asset, the house, the annuity, Gerald's stocks, but not for Liam, not for Sophie, not a cent." And he did not blink, just opened a legal pad and started writing. We structured it so that Chloe would inherit everything, but not until she turned 25, with early access only for educational expenses and housing. No luxury cars, no guilt-driven teenage bribes. And I asked Owen to include a clause that if Liam or Sophie ever attempted to challenge the will, Chloe would gain full control immediately, and they would forfeit all rights, including visitation during the trust's active years, which I knew sounded harsh. But when a parent chooses brunch over a funeral, and a spouse chooses manipulation over mourning, you stop worrying about diplomacy and start protecting the only piece of your husband still left on earth. Owen reviewed everything twice, added a section for the letter I would written, sealed in a manila envelope labeled for Chloe on her 18th birthday, and included a transcript of Liam's visit, confirming the deception, the financial abuse, and the emotional abandonment. And then he looked at me and said, "This is solid, Cora. No loopholes, no weak points, but it is going to hit him hard." And I said, "That is the point, Owen. It is supposed to." The final draft was notarized and filed within an hour, and I walked out feeling not like I would won, but like I would reclaim something, a boundary, a line in the sand Gerald had never quite been able to draw. And it was not revenge, it was reality. If my son wanted to treat his parents like ATM machines with no expiration date, then he would find out just how long that machine had been watching, documenting, waiting for the exact moment to cut the cord. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with a glass of wine and reread the letter I wrote to Chloe, 6 pages of truth. Not bitterness, explaining who her grandfather really was, what he would done for her father, and how that kindness had been turned into leverage and lies. I told her the money she would one day receive was not a gift. It was a responsibility, a reminder to choose love over convenience, loyalty over appearances, and courage over compliance, because she was the only one left in our family who still had a chance to do it right. When I sealed that envelope, I felt like I would close a chapter, not of grief, but of silence. The kind that creeps in when people you love betray you slowly enough that you forget it is betrayal at all, until one day you are standing at a funeral with no one beside you. And now, finally, I had made sure that silence would not be passed down. The letter landed in Liam's mailbox 4 days after I left Owen's office, sent by certified mail with a delivery confirmation. Slip that hit my inbox at 11:13 a.m. And I imagined him standing in his kitchen, flipping through envelopes like it was any other Wednesday, until he saw the law firm's logo stamped in the corner. And I knew the moment he opened it, because he did not call, did not text, did not email, not that day, not the next. But Sophie did. And not with words, just with a string of rapid-fire texts that ranged from passive-aggressive, "Wow, classy Cora," to openly hostile, "You are unbelievable. Do you even care about Chloe?" And I did not reply, because that silence was the most honest thing I could give them. When I finally picked up the phone on the 3rd day, it was Liam calling from a blocked number. His voice low, uncertain, almost soft, like he thought maybe if he used the tone he used when he was 6, and scared to admit he would broken something, I would melt into them. I said nothing. Just let the silence speak. When he finally said, "Is this real?" I answered, "You tell me," because there was nothing left to explain. And the pause that followed felt like the longest 10 seconds of my life before he finally said, I did not know Dad felt that way. And I snapped, not screamed, not raged, just snapped into ice. You did not know because you never asked, Liam. You were too busy pretending we were optional. That was when Sophie picked up on the other line, her voice sharp, demanding, you can't actually disinherit your own son. That is insane, and I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because of how predictable she was, how quickly the mask dropped when the money dried up. And I said, I did not disinherit him. I protected Chloe. Sophie scoffed. From us, like she could not even conceive of herself as a threat. I answered, from this moment, this conversation, this entitlement. Before she could spit out whatever venom she had next, I hung up, because that was the boundary. Now you do not get to choose neglect and then demand access. You do not get to opt out of grief and then claim inheritance. You do not get to erase the funeral and then rewrite the will. I sat at the kitchen table afterward, same spot where Gerald's heart gave out, staring at the quiet that followed, and for the first time since the service, I felt something close to stillness. Not happiness, not closure, but control. Like I had finally done the thing Gerald could not bring himself to do before it was too late. Later that night, I got one more text from Liam. It just said, I do not know how we come back from this. And I did not reply because the answer was not mine to give anymore. It was Chloe's. One day, when she was old enough to understand everything, she would decide who earned a place in her future. And that was the legacy I was leaving behind. They showed up on a Sunday afternoon without warning. Sophie stepping out of the car in heels too high for a driveway confrontation, and Liam trailing behind her like he was not sure whether he was there to support her or contain her. The second I opened the front door, she started in, not with a greeting, not with a question, but with an accusation. You are manipulating this family through legal threats, her voice sharp and practiced like she would rehearsed it in the car mirror. And I stood in the doorway without moving. Not inviting them in, not budging an inch, just letting the weight of her words hit the silence between us. Then she added, you are punishing us for setting boundaries. That was when I saw it. The smug tilt of her head, the belief that somehow she still held the moral high ground. Even after skipping Gerald's funeral, even after siphoning money through Liam, even after trying to play victim in a story she wrote with her own hands. I said nothing, just stepped aside enough for them to come in. Mostly because I knew Chloe was upstairs in the hallway, half listening like all kids do. And something in me needed her to witness this, not to hurt her, but to protect her, to give her truth as armor. Sophie strutted into the living room, her perfume heavy, her words heavier, and Liam sat down quietly, eyes on the floor, while she took the lead like she always did. We talked to a lawyer, she said, arms crossed. And if this will is not revised, we may have grounds to question your capacity. That is when I finally spoke, calm and low. Are you threatening to declare me mentally unfit? And Sophie shrugged. I am just saying, it is not unheard of. Grief does strange things to people. I saw Liam flinch at that. Whether from guilt or shame, I could not tell. And then I heard the faint creak of the hallway floor upstairs. Chloe shifting her weight, listening, and I knew every word being spoken was being absorbed by the only person in this family who still had a chance to see clearly. I turned to Liam and asked, do you agree with her? He did not answer, just swallowed and looked away. And that silence was louder than anything Sophie had said, because it confirmed what I needed to know. He would not stop her. He would not stand up to her. He would not defend his mother or his father's memory, not when it meant risking conflict in his own home. Sophie took that silence as fuel, stepped closer and said, you are tearing this family apart over money. I laughed. Not loud, not mocking, just a single dry laugh. The kind you let out when something so absurd it crosses into tragedy. And I said, I am tearing it apart. Gerald died alone. His own son did not show up. And you are worried about the inheritance. That was when I saw Chloe step into the hallway, halfway down the stairs, eyes wide but steady. Sophie turned, startled. But Chloe did not say a word, just looked at her father, then me, then walked slowly back upstairs. The weight of that silent moment hung in the room like a storm cloud, waiting to break. Sophie noticed it too, her expression faltering for the first time, and she said, she does not understand. I replied, she understands more than you think. And then I opened the front door, held it wide, and said, "We are done here." Liam stood without protest, walked out ahead of Sophie, and she hesitated for 1 second like she might say something else, but instead she followed, heels clacking against the tile, and I shut the door behind them before her last step hit the porch. It was 3 weeks after that confrontation when I found it. A small black flash drive inside an envelope, tucked into my mailbox. No note, no label, just my name written in Chloe's careful 12-year-old handwriting. My heart dropped, because I knew instantly it was not something playful or innocent. This was not a drawing or a digital birthday card. This was something serious, something secret. When I plugged it into my laptop, I sat in silence as folders opened themselves to me like tiny windows into a world I had not been allowed to see. Each one named by date, each filled with files that made my stomach twist, recordings of phone calls, screenshots of text messages, even a few videos filmed from behind her bedroom door. Shaky, but clear enough to catch every word Sophie and Liam had thought were safely tucked behind closed conversation. In one recording, Sophie was yelling, her voice sharp and fast. "She is manipulating everyone with that will if Chloe sides with her. I swear to God, Liam, we will pull her out of that school and homeschool her until she gets her head on straight." And in another, Liam's voice was quieter, but somehow worse. "Just let Mom run her game. It is not like we were counting on the money right now anyway. If Chloe plays nice, she can still help us later." And I sat there, frozen, listening to my own son talk about my estate like it was a strategy board, like I was some dying pawn instead of his living, breathing mother. But the worst part came in a video labeled Kitchen Night, where Sophie, standing by the sink, whispered into her phone, "If we push just a little harder, she will crack. We will say she is confused, maybe get the lawyer to question her state of mind, then boom, the trust gets flagged." I could hear Chloe's breath catch just as the video cut off. I do not know what broke me more, Sophie's audacity, or the fact that my granddaughter had been protecting me while I was trying to protect. Buried at the bottom of the folders was a text document just a few lines long, but it read like a gut punch. "Grandma, I did not know who else to tell. I hear things when they think I am asleep. I know they are lying. I believe you. I am saving this in case you ever need help." I stared at those words for a long time, longer than anything I would read since Gerald's letter. I knew in that moment that the legacy I thought I was leaving was not just about money or trust clauses or revenge. It was about her, about Chloe standing alone in a house where truth was treated like poison, recording evidence to protect the only adult in her life who had not failed her yet. I backed up the drive twice, one copy for Owen, one locked in my safe, and I wrote a new letter to Chloe, sealed and dated, to be opened if anything ever happened to me before she turned 18, because I needed her to know that not only did I believe her, I trusted her, and that if she ever needed to stand in front of a judge, a school counselor, or anyone else who questioned her sanity, she would have proof that she saw it all and never looked away. That night, I did not cry. I did not rage. I just sat in Gerald's chair, holding that tiny flash drive in my palm like it was a grenade and a gift all at once. And I made a vow not just to protect Chloe's inheritance, but to protect her voice, because in this family, she was the first one brave enough to use it. The mediation took place in a neutral office downtown, a beige room with polite furniture and bottled water on a glass table, the kind of place designed to feel non-threatening while everyone inside prepares to go to war. When Liam and Sophie walked in, Sophie dressed like she was going to a courtroom drama audition, and Liam looking 10 years older than he had a month ago, I did not greet them, did not offer a smile, just sat with Owen at my side, the folder containing Chloe's flash drive, the bank transfers, Gerald's unsent letter, and the transcript of Liam's recorded visit stacked neatly in front of me like a quiet threat wrapped in paper. The mediator introduced herself and began with a warm, neutral tone, asking why we were here. Sophie immediately launched into her narrative, painting me as grief-stricken and vengeful, suggesting my decisions were driven by emotional instability and potential cognitive decline. I watched her rehearse her victimhood like a script she would memorize, while Liam sat beside her, silent, face drawn, eyes darting away every time I looked at him. When it was my turn, I did not raise my voice, did not tremble. I just passed the folder across the table and said, "This is why." and I watched the mediator flip through page after page of documentation, dates, transactions, handwritten notes, the audio file list, and finally, Chloe's flash drive with a simple printed label, evidence. I knew the moment the room shifted, the exact second the weight of truth broke the illusion Sophie had been spinning, because the mediator paused, looked up, and asked Sophie directly, "Were you aware that your daughter recorded statements about attempting to alter a legal trust through manipulation?" Sophie's face drained of color as she sputtered. "She is 12. She does not understand context, but it was too late. The words were out, the recordings existed, and the facade crumbled fast." The mediator turned to Liam and asked if he would like to speak, and he said nothing, just rubbed his hands together like he was trying to erase fingerprints from his own guilt. And I said, "She tried to warn you." That is when Sophie exploded, not with words of defense, but fury. Pure, unfiltered rage, slamming her hand on the table and yelling, "This is all because you could not handle your husband dying. Now you are trying to punish us because you are lonely." The mediator calmly asked her to step outside for a moment to collect herself, and Sophie stormed out, heels echoing in the hallway, leaving Liam behind. For the first time since Gerald's funeral, Liam finally spoke directly to me, his voice small, tired. I did not know it had gotten that bad, and I said, "You did not want to know." He nodded slowly, staring at the floor. "I just wanted peace." I told him, "You do not get peace from silence. You get it from standing up when it matters." When the mediator returned, she informed us that there was no basis to challenge the trust, that it was legally sound, morally justified, based on overwhelming documentation, that Chloe's statements held weight as evidence of undue pressure within the household. Sophie did not come back in, not even to hear the outcome. Liam left shortly after, quietly, without a handshake, without a look back. I stayed behind for a moment, gathering my things, and felt the strangest sensation wash over me. Not triumph, not relief, but a kind of settled sorrow. The kind that comes when you realize the battle's over, not because you won, but because the truth finally made it impossible for anyone to keep pretending otherwise. Chloe turned 18 last Friday, and the day came not with balloons or cake, but with a quiet knock on my door just after noon. Her eyes wide but steady as she stepped inside and handed me the letter. I had written her 5 years ago, unopened, still sealed, and said I wanted to read it with you. I did not say anything, just nodded and watched as she carefully opened the envelope like it might break apart in her hands, unfolding the 6 pages I had poured my soul into back when everything felt like it was collapsing. She read silently for several minutes, her face shifting from focus to tears, pausing only once to ask, "Is all of this still true?" I said, every word. She hugged me tighter than she ever had, whispering, "Thank you for telling me the truth," when no one else would. I felt every ounce of pain and purpose inside that hug. After, we sat down in Gerald's old chair together. She pulled out her phone and showed me a short video. Her standing in front of a judge at a legal name change hearing, saying clearly, "I would like to change my middle name to Coraline, after my grandmother." And I could not stop the tears then. Couldn't hold back the way my chest cracked open at the sound of her reclaiming her identity, choosing a part of this family that did not hurt her, did not lie to her, did not treat her like leverage. Later that afternoon, we went to her graduation ceremony. As she crossed the stage and they called out her full, new name, Chloe Coraline Whitfield, she looked right at me and smiled. I saw on her face not just pride, but clarity, the kind Gerald used to wear when he made hard decisions that no one else understood until it was too late. Liam was there, too, sitting alone in the back row, his eyes red, his suit wrinkled, clapping out of obligation more than joy. And he did not approach me. Didn't approach Chloe either. Not because he was not allowed, but because I think he finally understood what it meant to be cut off in ways deeper than a bank account. After the ceremony, Chloe ran to me first, hugged me again, and whispered, "She chose me to live with next semester." Her roommate backed out. I laughed through tears, knowing I would get another year of her stories, her music in the background, her toothbrush in my bathroom, like a quiet victory against everything Sophie tried to script. We never mentioned Sophie that day, not once, because by then she had faded into the background like a subplot that had lost its relevance. Her silence more telling than any apology she never gave. When I tucked Chloe in that night, in her old childhood room, I left the door cracked open just like I used to. She said, You gave me a life I did not even know I needed. I kissed her forehead, and Thulshin said, You chose it, sweetheart. I just cleared the path. As I walked down the hallway back to my own room, past Gerald's photo on the wall, I touched the frame and said softly, She is going to be okay, love. We are going to be okay. For the first time in years, I actually believed it.